more than just Senate Bill 5? Is it politics? Has it become about you? Is that why the other side doesn't want to work about it?
Well, Jim, well, we have a Senate Bill 5. I mean, that's what we have. It's not, for me, it's not about them. I mean, I read in one of the papers that we should put past grievances behind us or whatever. I don't have any grievance against any of these folks. I mean, that's not the issue. I grew up in a union town. I never saw a white collar until I went to Ohio State. I mean, I respect what unions do for their workers. But sometimes, I remember being here in the legislature when Sheeton 2 closed down. Because the union couldn't figure out a way to work with the management. All those people lost their jobs. I've never understood that. But there are a lot of unions in this state, private sector unions, who have figured out a way to work with management. I mean, the issue here is really with public unions right now. And if you talk privately to the private unions, they will tell you that the public unions just don't get it. They just don't get it. That, this day of not paying for health care or paying for pensions, that day is coming to an end. Regardless of Senate Bill 5, it's coming to an end. People can't afford this stuff. So it'd be better to try to work something out and give tools to the local communities to deal with these problems, as President Niehaus says. And but maybe they're fighting the last election. They're fighting the last war. I'm not. So Jim, I can't answer that. I just want it to be made clear. My door is open. They want to talk to me, we'll talk to me. Repeal the bill now, then we'll talk. That's it. What did you call that?
That's an ultimatum. That's not a negotiation. It's
an ultimatum, and as President Niehaus says, an ultimatum and not a negotiation. They want to talk. I've been in these processes before, folks, and things can be improved through discussion.
And couldn't the repeal then couldn't that be seen as a condition of talks? And if you were going to come to an agreement, wouldn't you have to repeal the bill and then pass something else anyway? So why not just do it now?
Well, because at that point, number one, you have no negotiating leverage. When we had our doors open in both the Senate and the House from the beginning of this process, and they chose not to walk through that door. So what makes you think they're willing to talk now? They refused to do it up to this point. They're not even here today. So I frankly have just been disappointed that they've chosen not to participate in the process. I mean, we watched what played out in Washington. We watched how dysfunctional that was. And what was a common theme you heard from people around the country? They need to sit down and talk. They need to work through their differences for the betterment of the country. In this case, we just need to sit down and talk about ideas that are better for the state. So, again, we're more than willing to talk. We've been willing since day one. And when I hear them say that they weren't invited to the table, it's just absolutely not true. The door was open. They were invited to testify. Many of them did testify. And when they were asked the specific question in committee, what would you do to change this bill, to improve this bill? They said, nothing. We just need to get rid of it. So they offered no constructive comments whatsoever.
I want to make one other point here also. The notion that we think our bill is flawed, that's false. We believe that the public workers ought to pay 15% for their health care. Most public workers connected to the state do that already. The Highway Patrol does it already. We're saying that you ought to contribute 10% to your guaranteed pension, which you recover when you retire. That is reasonable. Most people have a 401k. When the market gets clobbered, they get hurt. A guaranteed pension means you get it forever. We're asking them to give 10%. Binding arbitration. Having an outsider come in and impose a financial settlement on a community that they can't afford, it is reasonable to say that. Now, they say they want to come and negotiate these other things. Maybe they think the current system is flawed. They're kind of hanging to the status quo. They really don't want to change. But look, I just think if their membership, would call on them, and part of the problem is the membership has been fed stuff for about 6 months that isn't even accurate, like teachers being told you're going to be capped at $32,000 and all this other nonsense. That's why they don't talk about the provisions of the bill. And when you ask them to read the bill, they don't want to read the bill. And here's where the problem is in a campaign. As more information comes out, the public will support it. I mean, that's just the fact. You think that somebody working in the private sector doesn't think that a public employee ought to pay something for their health care or pay something for their pension? That's why they don't want to talk about it. So, but look, door's open, Reg. Bill?
We had an interesting experience looking at the website. Because, of course, most Farm Bureau websites show the contents of a bill that they're interested in. The contents of this bill are not in or on the website of this organization. They don't want their members to know what the bill is and does. They want to send them propaganda that indicates, as the governor pointed out, the teachers were told in a mailing to all of them that they would have their pay cut to $32,000 a year. First of all, I hope some of them took civics at some point or another that would tell them that you cannot do away with under the Constitution. You cannot do away with unions. That's not possible. It's not allowed. It's illegal. But they were perfectly willing to lie to the people that they work for, in quotation marks. It seems to me that what we have here is a failure to communicate, in the words of the movie. And what does that mean to the people who are going to be subject to what's going on here? It means that they're going to have a whole view of what is going on and happening that is false. And as a result of that, they're going to make certain assumptions about what people are trying to do in the General Assembly. They're going to think that these people who are making suggestions for what's going to happen in our society are crazy. And what happens then when the pension systems are in such deep difficulty they can't meet their obligations? I've been through this before when the Ohio Deposit Guarantee Fund collapsed. And Governor Celeste asked me to come down to his office because he knew I would work with him and communicate with him even though I was a Republican. And we had to redo the whole thing. You know why? Because it said the Ohio Deposit Guarantee Fund. It had nothing to do with government. Ladies and gentlemen, that's something that we're going to face in some of the areas of pensions. That's a very scary prospect. People have come to work for the state predicated upon the fact that there are these benefits. And yet, they may or may not be there without the participation of all of the public employees. Some participate. Some participate. Why are they different? Why are the people who work in private enterprise totally different from these folks who think that the state should pay 100% of these funds? It can't go on. Is anybody looking? Does anybody see what's happening in Europe? Does anybody understand what the potential is in this country? For God's sake, it's time for us to talk and to work out a resolution which is real world, not pie in the sky when you die.
One more question.
Gentlemen,
Let me just say one other thing. Yesterday, I met with the operating engineers, and we were inviting them first to participate in our energy conference. And secondly, you know, we want to work with them because this development of Utica and Marcellus shale is important. This is a perfect example of where labor and in our administration, along with the legislature, has to work together. There's a great benefit if we all can work together. That's why I go to Lordstown. It's why I'm going to go to Detroit next week, talk to the automakers, and been up to the UAW plants. I want people to understand who are in unions that it is in all of our interests to work together as Ohioans, and we can have great progress if we do that. Laura, last question.
Gentlemen,